Hello again, everybody. John Hendrix alongside Ross Jackson. Thank you for tuning in to Second and Saints once again. We're here on a fine Sunday evening, enjoying the come down from the week, right? We had an HBC Legacy Bowl. We had the
Oof.
combine there, and I mean it's busy week. So I mean we got plenty to talk about tonight. The combine's coming in Indy. We're gonna both be there. I can't imagine anything Saints that we'll talk about, but all that fun stuff. But as always, partner in crime, Ross Jackson. How are you doing this evening?
Doing great, man. Doing great. We had a great time at the HBCU Legacy Bowl yesterday. Always good to be able to see, that and to be able to see that here in New Orleans and, everybody that comes out to support it and everything. We saw several members of the Saints coaching staff or former members of the coaching staff, players, all that kind of stuff out there too. So it's just cool to see that amount of support around all that and looking forward to being around that combine environment in Indianapolis this coming weeks. It's always a ton of fun as well. How about you, man? How you holding up?
I'm doing well, man. Just having the road over to Indy right now, and so it's kind of crazy. I'm one of those weird people. I don't mind driving up to this. I like
John be
stop
driving
off in Nashville. This is the only one place besides the Senior Bowl that I drive, right? And I like it because I get to stop off in Nashville, and Nashville's a fun spot, So that's really all I need to say about that. Is Nashville is just in itself is so fun, but again, I'll be there, and it's nice to have a car when you're somewhere like that.
Yeah, that's true.
That extended period of time, like when we're in Cali. Of course, we're gonna have to rent a car because that's gonna be fun. But, anyways, yeah, you mentioned the HBCU combine, is Legacy Bowl. Man, look, I'll start there. It was a really big turnout this year, and we were both there last year. This year, only one team was not represented. Some teams had double scouts there. Omar Khan was in attendance. Saints made a lot of appearances. I saw a lot of players there too, and besides Alvin Kamara, Cam Jordan being out there, there's some players that we just haven't seen anything from in quite some time that were out at this Saints facility doing some work. And I'm not going to name drop everybody, but Malcolm Roach was one of them because he was out there on social media and stuff. But that was good to see. Some of these guys working alongside Matt Rhea and there's some real talent there in HBCU. I think that's the biggest thing is you go from this is the third year that they're doing this. And the first year it was at South Alabama Stadium. And then this is the second year they're doing this in New Orleans. And so it's right in the Saints' backyard. Of course, they're going to represent and such, but more players that are on this list. I thought there's a lot of talent, and you're looking at guys that hopefully maybe at least in that day 2 range, but definitely day 3 priority undrafted free agents. And we got to see a lot of that talent throughout the week. And then they were able to, showcase their skills at the HBCU Legacy Bowl. And I mentioned Omar Khan. Obviously, he's a New Orleans native, but, he's sitting there talking to prospects, scouts talking to prospects. We're talking to these prospects too. And some of them were balling out, man. I think it was really cool to see. But your impressions of the Legacy Bowl and just kind of that whole experience, because look, we talked to Jameis yesterday. Speaking of players, we talked to Jameis yesterday. We talked to just some of the guys that are behind the scenes running the Legacy Bowl. Chris Olave was out there. You said coaches Marcus Robertson was out there talking to Justin Simmons. That's a fun little one we'll talk about maybe in the future later. But just your thoughts and impressions on the HBCU Legacy Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, I can't start a conversation around the HBCU Legacy Bowl without talking about, Davius Richard. He was the guy kind of going into this Legacy Bowl throughout the week. He had been impressed at the combine, impressed with throwing and all these other things. Came out there, had the beautiful cover 2 hole shot down the left side to Mosley down the sideline, and then kind of took that zone read keeper, ran it in for a touchdown, and took a tough situation with his ankle kind of turning the way it's not supposed to turn. You know what I mean? Yeah. They put the air cast on him, had to, cart him off and everything. And it was a tough scene. That was the first, it was a 5-play touchdown drive. He, was 2 for 2 for 50 plus on that, plus the rush, everything. And so that really stunk to sort of see all that because he was so impressive. He was one of those guys that you look at and you go, okay, he, along with a couple of those HBCU prospects, he was one of those guys that you looked at and it was okay, that's the quarterback that might get the shot, and that's such a big thing for, this level of competition. You look at some of the spring leagues and stuff like that. If they can just get one quarterback in, then all of a sudden the entire conversation around the level of play changes. And he might have been one of the guys that could have done that, with a late round flyer as an undrafted free agent. Now he's going to undergo, this sort of recovery process and everything. And hopefully we get to see him again after that. But we know how fickle the NFL can be sometimes when it comes to all those things. So, I got to start there. I know it's the bad news, but it's the big news coming out of Legacy Bowl. So that part was kind of gut wrenching to see. It was heartbreaking to see. But then, you saw these guys rally together, continue to play afterwards. We saw some other good performances, some top level performances. On the defensive line, some great performances in the secondary as well. So, there was some good things to take away from all of it, but obviously that Richard news was the biggest hit, at the HBCU Legacy Bowl.
Yeah, that was horrible to see. And, I was talking to some of his people there, and it's just like, they're heartbroken. I mean, that's the only way you can describe it. And, his agent was telling you just he's going to bounce back. He's a good kid. This isn't the end of it for him by any means, but it is unfortunate. And, we kind of said, it's like, what's he doing running in this game anyways? Right. And so that's kind of a tough thing to see, but, the talent was on display there. Again, you mentioned the defense. One of the crazy parts is Jarvion Howard. He's probably the guy that maybe was impressed the most at HBCU practices and Legacy Bowl and the combine. He didn't play in the game, but running back from Alcorn, man, he was impressive, from the get-go. And so he was one of the guys talking to Omar Khan for, a few minutes. And again, I look at him, it's kind of like I get Derrick Henry vibes, but not really. Just kind of the build and the way he's shaped and stuff. But
yeah, he's just a big dude, man.
He is a big dude. And he's somebody I'm just looking at him like, man, I can't stop seeing Derrick Henry like in some aspects. But again, you mentioned the game itself, but defense was kind of the one that went, Team Gaither, Team Robinson, these two, their uniforms are on fire too. I love that uniform design, a lot of support out there and such. And look, Jeremy Musa had made things interesting with that touchdown drive.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's a low scoring game, 10-6, but man, we saw some plays, one of the guys coming off the edge, he beats the tackle and he forces the fumble and he recovers the fumble. I mean, those types of plays that you remember, the secondary play, I mean, all those types of things that you see, you're putting your skills out on display for sure. And so again, it seems like, man, you say a 10-6 game, but there's some good tackling going on. There's some good coverage. There's some great catches, a lot of good things that you see from this game.
Yeah, lots of good stuff out of there. We saw some good play on the defensive line as well. Zarion Hayes out of was it Alabama State, if I remember correctly, looked fantastic. Obviously, he came Alabama A&M. My apologies. He came out there. He won Defensive Player of the game on the other side and everything. And so, he was just disruptive, several sacks. He had, a couple of moments where he was involved in those, fumble exchanges in the backfield and things like that too. So, this is the second year in a row for me. Like you think back to last year, Dumas coming out of Southern last year at the Legacy Bowl, he was the big standout. So another year to where you get this big interior, guy that's, popping off over on the defensive line and everything like that. And so it was cool to see that too, because that's not a place that you expect to see, a lot of fireworks when it comes to an all-star game. You expect to see it at wide receiver, at corner, at running back, at quarterback, all that kind of stuff. But to see it, in the middle of the defensive line and out on the edge, he moved around quite a bit, but to see it on the defensive line, I thought was a really good just sort of opportunity to be able to showcase where you are, heads and shoulders above your competition, even in an all-star game.
Yeah, and they got some receivers going at it and John at it with the DBs.
That's right.
Mean, it's just a great atmosphere. One of the guys, just make sure I got his college right, but Javion Morton from Morgan State.
Yep.
I mean, he's one of my favorites
to watch.
Just keep looking at. And again, you look at these guys, some of these are going to be bread and butter special teams and stuff like that. But, again, there's a real growth. And I know Doug Williams has done a really good job at heading this thing up. And, again, the support's only going to grow from here, for this game. And again, you don't sleep on these HBCUs, man. Xavier Smith is a prime example. I remember watching him at the combine last year. I was like, this guy looks like he could be something, and he lands on with the Rams and such. And so it's just all these talent, and some of them are going to be in this new UFL league that's coming out in March. So some of the guys that were prominent last year, but they're going to be some of these guys from this game that are going to take that chance and try to put themselves on the map. But, again, a great event, Saints practice facility, Everything was great the whole week, over at Yulman Stadium, Tulane. They had a baseball game going on at the same time too. So that was kind of interesting, but great atmosphere. It was handled extremely well. So definitely good things from the HBCU Legacy Bowl, Combine, and the entire week out there. But, as far as the Saints go, nothing really.
They were a little busy,
right?
Yeah, they were a little busy this week too,
a little bit, right? I mean, because everybody, it's salary cap cutting season, right? It's all those types of things. It's restructure season, whatever you want to call it. And the NFL released their final cap figure, and it was higher than expected. It was some of the makeup from that COVID year. So $255.4 million. It's up $30 million. And so coming into it, Saints, we're right around, 70, 80 million, 85
like 80,
as much. Right? Yeah. And so it's all that voodoo math that you had to do. And they announced a regular figure. They get restructures done with Derek Carr, Eric McCoy, Nathan Shepard. One's coming with Cesar Ruiz. And then suddenly they're just $40 million over. And that's not even counting what Shepard's hit was going to be. I know people will talk about it. We talked about this last week. Kicking the can, doing all this fun stuff. Are you surprised that they did any of this with Derek Carr? Because now you got to remember, this is a long-term plan with Derek Carr. This is not we got him for a year. I mean, this is something that, everything I was told, this is a long-term commit with Derek Carr. This is not just he's going to be our quarterback for another year, and then they're probably going to move on. They see him as a long-term option here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what you're going to do when you go out there and you sign a quarterback to, a 4 or 5 year deal and all this stuff. And then you've got $30 million base salaries and everything. Like you're building that contract with the intent to restructure, with the intent to move some of that money down the way. Shout out to Jonathan, who's my cap nerd buddy on X. I know he's ready. with the screenshots. But like you're always that was always going to be the plan with this, right? And I've had people who have asked me before, like, okay, well, now that the Saints have done this, are they married to Derek Carr for 2025? And here's the way that I put it: the Saints are married to Derek Carr in 2025 because they're going to want Derek Carr in 2025 to be their quarterback. Like that's the most likely situation here. But they're not necessarily married to him just because they restructured the contract. Like if you're in a situation as an NFL franchise, wherein let's say you go into 2024 and you win 2 or 3 games and you decide, okay, we're going to blow all this up. We're going to reboot. We're going to take the medicine for a year and then get back to rebuilding in 2026 to be competitive. And things like that kind of have one of those Tampa 2023s that turned out they could be very competitive even in that situation and everything. Then it doesn't matter the dead money that you take on. Like that's not a part of the conversation anymore. If you're making that decision to move on from your quarterback, to move on from your head coach, to move on from your staff, to reboot as best as possible, then the dead money conversation isn't going to be relevant. You're going to post June 1 designate moves, things like that, kick some of that stuff down the road still, and then, spread it out over the course of maybe 2 years of medicine taking, if you will. And then you're right back at it again in 2026, 2027, And so, but that's not the plan, right? The plan here was bring Derek Carr to New Orleans for the 2023 season. The contract was built and structured specifically so that they would be able to continue to restructure it. It's going to happen again, probably in 2025. In fact, another $10 million of its 2025 salary becomes guaranteed less than a month from today as the new league year begins. I think it's March 15th, if I remember correctly.
Fifth day of the league. It's going to hit 5th day of the league year in 2025. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, but
it's this year where that $10 million is going to be tacked on to 2025.
Right. Right. So you're making a year. You're making an 8-figure year prior commitment to Derek Carr. Like that's going to be the intent, is for him to be here in 2025. And look, one of the things that I'll point out is that Dennis Allen and the Saints, as they've talked about Clint Kubiak coming in as offensive coordinator, this new system, all those other things, they keep saying quarterback friendly. And so that's what it is. You're trying to get the quarterback friendly system in that's going to effectively make every analysis then be about Derek Carr, right? But also put you in a situation to where you're trying to aid that quarterback that you want in the building. And that's where I think the New Orleans Saints are going to go with all this.
Yeah, and I mean, again, you look at these contracts, there's more that they can be able to do. And of course, Carr's not a surprise. That was their biggest cap hit. I mean, coming in, he was 11% of the figure. And so again, you look at the relief, the way they employ things, like what they did with Eric McCoy, they added a void year in 2028. So I mean, you do all
Same with
the
Shepard.
math or whatever. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's a common practice the Saints employ, and why don't other teams do it? I think when you look at it, it makes sense, but again, you have to see some results this season. I feel like
Yeah.
because you're sitting there kind of like, okay, we're getting a little bit older. We probably need to inject some youth here, get some things going, some changes going, and hopefully that kind of happens. And so, one of the things that I would say here also on the cap is when you're looking at the salary cap, because some people were confused by this, is that it's not as simple as Derek Carr restructures 30 million and then
Right.
the math is you're 40 over, you're $30 million here, and you should only be 10. It's top 51 that's in effect. So if you restructure Derek Carr's contract and it saves 25 million or whatever the case is between him and McCoy, however much that was, you still have to minus out the bottom 51 of that contract. So if that's like $3 million, that's where the difference comes in for a lot of this in the salary cap. And so it's a little bit interesting as far as how the cap management goes for this team. And again, they're going to have decisions to make, and some of that stuff is going to hurt them in some aspects, the dead money and things that come with Michael Thomas. And what are they going to do with Marcus May? If he's a post June 1st cut, they save some money there, and of course that's a decision they're going to have to make. But everybody has their own opinion about the cap. The Saints, this is just a common practice, and more are going to come, especially while we're at the combine. It's just going to happen because they're going to have the space. They're going to make space. They have to sign some free agents. They're going to sign free agents, and then they got to make room for their draft class too.
Yeah, and they're not the only ones that do this. That draft class, by the way, at least as of right now, considering their picks that they have, is going to be around like $5 million or so in terms of like the effective use of all of that and everything. And so they're not the only ones that do this either. I mean, the Rams do a little bit of this. The Eagles do a little bit of this. The Vikings do a bit of it. The Steelers have always kind of done the backload contract thing. So I think that like what a lot of people think of with dead money is, oh, well, that's money that can't be spent, which isn't true. It's money that's already been spent is all that it is. And so when you think about the fact that when they go out and they hit free agency and they, go into the beginning of the league year, $100 million over the salary cap, and then they turn around and they sign a quarterback for $35+ million per year. How do they do that? Well, they keep the front of that contract very, very low. That first year contract base salary wise is usually veteran minimum, which for somebody that's played more than 7 years in the NFL, it's like $1.25 million, somewhere around there. And then, the prorate of the a fifth, if you will, of the signing bonus that player is given. And that's their cap hit for the year. So it doesn't stop them from spending money. Then all of a sudden the base salary goes up to $30 million, $35 million, $40 million for the end of the contract. That's effectively how they structured portions of Derek Carr's contract. So, with them being able to restructure, save money or move money, let me say that more appropriately that way. It doesn't actually stop them from spending money as well. They're spending the same amount of money. They're just spending it over a longer period of time that sometimes outlasts when that player is in is on the roster. The tricky part becomes when multiple of those players are off the roster in the same season or in the same offseason, because then whatever money is left accelerates to right away, unless you can defer it with a post June 1 designation in terms of that cut. But you can only do that for 2 players each year. So you got to balance all of it. And that's why guys like Mickey Loomis and particularly Kai Harley get paid big bucks to move around, big bucks in order to make it all work. So it's all part of what the plan is in terms of how they move that money around, and then how they spend that money and still bring in those big free agents and things like that, which I don't think that they're not going to make a splash this offseason, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's only one in free agency.
Yeah, I mean, that's how you can get you a pass rusher, right? I mean,
right.
And Carl Granderson's contract, that's going to be automatic product probably as far as the restructure goes. I mean, that's something, but you could get a pass rusher and put him at that veteran minimum and then give him a pretty big signing bonus and spread it out however you need to. I mean, there's ways you can do it. Or if they use that for an offensive lineman, I mean, there's just multiple ways that they can use this particular amount of money and just be able to, be smart about it. Luminomics is what I like to call it. Loomising, if you want to call it that. Loomis Bucks is the one I saw earlier
I like
today.
Yeah, I like Loomis Bucks.
Yeah. And so it's it makes sense. And there's other things that come into play. Restricted free agent tags, those also are dropped too. The tenders,
Yeah.
they're 2, 4, and 6. So first right of first refusals like 2.4, 2.5. So the only restricted free agents the Saints have are Lynn Bowden and Adam Prentice. And so usually back in the day, you would be able to tag these guys no brainers. But now
Yeah.
with the rising cost of these, it's hard to see that this team is going to actually tag somebody. They didn't tag any of the restricted guys last year. So that's something else to keep in mind. And then, one of the things we should also address here is Rashid Shaheed. He's an exclusive rights free agent. I know he touched on this, but just a reminder, he's an exclusive rights free agent. So that just basically means that he can't negotiate. He does anything. The Saints basically make him an offer, and that's kind of it. There's no negotiating. But we talked about it here. They just need to do right by Rashid, right?
Yeah.
Is don't give him just some little Olay contract, which I know the team won't do. Give him some type of incentive and something, a reward. We've seen it with guys like Juwan Johnson in the past. We
Carr
just talked
Granderson
about
as
it,
well.
but yeah, it just makes sense. But I've seen some people's like, are they going to resign Rashid? And it's like, yeah, of course they are. It's
Yeah, he ain't going nowhere. They don't have a way to not re-sign him, basically.
Yeah.
The thing that's really nice about it is that, like, you can do right by him by giving him a 2-year deal and then pay him above what the exclusive rights tag would have been, or give him a 2-year deal and pay him above what the restricted free agent tag would have been, and things like that. That's kind of what they did with both those guys, Juwan, as well as, of course, Carl Granderson. And then look, Carl Granderson got a whole new contract after that. Juwan Johnson, if he has a good year here in 2024, I wouldn't be surprised to see him get a whole new contract after that as well. I mean, these are guys that they really like. Rashid Shaheed is in that category. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them find some, $2 million deal. I mean, excuse me, not 2 million, 2-year deal, for whatever amount of money, with some of that money and a signing bonus kicked down the road a little bit and all that kind of stuff. Just to, be able to say, look, man, we like what you do here. We're very excited about how the role has grown, and then be able to sort of, do good by Rashid Shaheed, as you said, by doing that. And so it doesn't have to be a 5-year deal, a 4-year deal, or anything like that. If you can get that done, go for it. And if you want to go down that road, go for it. I wouldn't agree to that if I was Rashid Shaheed. I'm trying to get new money in 2 more years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
right.
yeah, I'll take a 2-year deal if I'm him, just as a means of the organization saying, hey, we want you here.
Yeah, not bad for a guy out of Weber State that was undrafted. You know what I'm saying? So that's always a good thing. And of course, around this time, you're going to start seeing a lot more of fallout from players like Xavier Howard. He's going to cost a whole bunch of money. Hunter Renfrow, he's going to be a guy that people have talked about this trade and stuff. They're not trading for Hunter Renfrow. He's going to be a cap casualty. They'll try to. Nobody's going to take on that contract, right? And I think he's probably going to find himself in New Orleans before too long. But again, there's a guy like that. Keep an eye on that. Justin Simmons, we saw him at the HBCU Legacy Bowl on Sunday. He's going to be a heavy cap hit, and the thing is, he didn't have any guaranteed money, so maybe him and Marcus Robinson, they had ties in Denver. I'm not saying he's going to join the Saints, but some of those things you got to keep in your back pocket too, to remember that a lot of these players in their final years of the contract, they're not going to see that figure, and teams are just not going to pay him that.
Yeah. He's got, it's over $14 million of his base salary, but like you said, none of it's guaranteed. I think probably Denver is going to extend him and keep him there. I mean, they would create themselves a pretty big hole at that position if they ended up moving on from him. And then if they extend him with the extension, they can drop his salary cap hit, especially with no guaranteed money in 2024 and all that. But man, if he did hit the market for any reason, I have to imagine that Marcus Robertson would be sprinting his way to Denver to drive him back to New Orleans if he needed to, because those, like you said, those guys go way back. We saw them chopping it up, during the HBCU Legacy Bowl game. They have a really good relationship and all that. So if he hits the market, I would feel, you know how it goes. This is that season where everybody that hits the market, you get the Twitter mentions like, hey, is this a good option for the Saints? Is this a good option for the Saints and everything? Justin Simmons, don't even ask. The answer is yes. The answer is 100% yes. But I don't see him making his way out of Denver. But boy, it sure would be interesting, especially if the Saints were to move on from Marcus May as well. Like, that's a pretty good fit for the system next to Tyrann Mathieu. And then you've got guys like, if you can get Jonathan Abram back behind him, you've got Jordan Howden behind Tyrann. Like, that's a pretty nice setup at what's already been the strongest position group for this team in its secondary.
Yeah, it's going to be should the Saints sign everybody season? It's coming up,
I got the
it's just
Emmanuel
how it is.
Ogbah questions. And look, the answer is yes. You know what I mean? Like, go for it. Like, try
Should they
everything.
be
You know what I
interested?
mean? But
Yeah, they should be
yeah.
interested in a lot of guys. Now, it doesn't mean that they should sign everybody and they should fly them out to New Orleans. I mean, think about the past several years. They've been tied to some pretty big, high profile guys, and just hasn't necessarily worked out, or this player picked a different team and all this other stuff. And so it's not that people just avoid New Orleans like the plague. I mean, people they've tried bringing in some of this high type of caliber and stuff, and they have. I mean, in some aspects, but this is an off season where, again, we talked about it last week, that this offensive line needs to make sure they got the offensive staff in place now. So we kind of knew who was going to be there, but they made it official. Only one surprise is bring on the new assistant wide receivers coach. But, again, this offensive coaching staff, just talking about all of them, really Clancy Barone and some of the assistants are the only ones that come back.
Yep.
What do you think of the staff? And is this going to be what unlocks this offense for more consistency going forward?
You sure hope so. And I'm glad that you said consistency, because it's not really about production, right? It's production. It's steady production over a season. And that's what you're really looking for. Saints had a really nice last 5 or 6 games, but they didn't have that for the beginning of the year. It took them a lot of time to kind of find their rhythm and all that. And so there's 2 things that I think the Saints have calculated in terms of their practices over the course of this offseason that I think they're hoping helps to translate the system a lot quicker and be able to produce more consistently earlier on in the season. We'll see if they work. But I think that the first one is that they bring in a new system, but they bring in a bunch of coaches that already have experience working together and that already have experience working in the system. So there's a lot of cohesion. There's a lot of I'm not going to call it continuity, but there's just a lot of that sort of symbiotic nature amongst all this coaching staff already, and this system that they're bringing in and trying to introduce, that I think helps. Because the only thing that makes that's harder than teaching your roster a new system is teaching your roster a new system with a bunch of coaches that are also learning that new system. I think you've alleviated that with a little bit of the hiring practices here. And I think the other thing is doing training camp out west in Irvine, or in California, wherever it's going to be once we get the final notes on that. We believe it's going to be Irvine. We believe it should be Irvine. And so with all of that, they're there 24/7. They live, breathe, eat, sleep football the entire time. And I think that will help them quite a bit in terms of learning that new system as an offense together as a group for those, 4 or 5 weeks that they would be out there, or that we would be out there.
Exactly. Yeah. And believe it or not, they've thought through this stuff, right? I mean, they don't just be like, let's look at this talent of this roster. What do you think the best fit of this offense is going to be? Then get the guys who would make it work. And then this guy says they want to work with this guy or this person. I mean, it makes sense, right? And I mean, you just see all those things. And again, I like the concept of Clint Kubiak. Again, we talked about him last week on the show, and I was digging up some stuff in the Vikings, and it just gets me excited. And it's just the little things. It's just the play action. It's the motion. It's the running routes, using guys like Justin Jefferson as a decoy, getting the tight end involved more. I mean, it is reason to be excited. And again, they got to get this offensive line figured out. I know that's a priority. New offensive line coach. I really hope that John Benton is going to be a guy that helps unlock Trevor Penning at the next level. We spent some time talking about him last week on the show, and again, I just think that he's one of those important pieces, but they're going to want some guys that are athletic and get down the field. I think Penning can do it, and it's just, where is that going to be? Is that going to be at a tackle position? Is that going to be a guard position? It's going to be really, really interesting. And, these offensive coaches, they met over, the weekend, last weekend before they had the HBCU Legacy Bowl. We even saw some out there at the combine and stuff, but, it was really interesting just to see all those faces and stuff out there. But I'll keep those in my pocket. But it's, again, it's one of those that you look at how they're going to make this all work. And again, you look at how Dennis Allen needs to make this work. And this is something where I think, Clint Kubiak is a guy that has a little bit of authority and the smarts, and not that Pete Carmichael didn't have the authority, but I think Clint Kubiak is a little bit more confident and stable in his dad's system, or, what he's trying to employ with that Shanahan mix, all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think that another one that's a big piece. Albert Breer wrote about it over on his Monday Morning Quarterback last week. Was the addition of quarterback coach Andrew Janocko.
Mm,
This guy is just wild smart, like
smart.
incredibly smart. He has sort of this really intimate knowledge of how to work the quick game, the quick passing game, 3-step drop, get the ball out, all this other stuff. And it's sort of building on the tenets of getting the ball in the hands of your playmakers and letting them make plays, which is something we didn't see the Saints do consistently last year. And you want to help your offensive line out, get the ball out. It's not just about what do you do on the offensive line. What are you doing in your scheme to support your offensive line as well? And so I think that that's another big piece of it is, can you get the ball out quickly? Can you do all that? And I think Andrew Janocko is going to be a big piece for the New Orleans Saints getting the opportunity to be able to do that. It's going to be really interesting to see how this all pans out, because this collection of coaching staff that they put together is going to be intriguing to watch in 2024, but it gets even more intriguing projecting to 2025, 2026, what other movement happens, who moves where. Like, do the Saints all of a sudden incorporate an offensive system with such success that it becomes a place where coaches come and go and get hired away and things like that? We haven't really seen sort of like the tree develop here in New Orleans. Do we start to see something like that if this is successful? I think you would, but the big thing is that it's got to be successful first. But the first step to that success is, can you get the right people in the building? I think the Saints believe that they've done that.
Yeah, and look, we hope it happens, right?
Right.
I just, it's been hard sitting through this offense for the past several years, right? It's just no consistency is the biggest thing that drives me crazy. And look, we sat through Ian Book starting against the Dolphins in that COVID game. And then not that I'm picking on Ian Book. It's just, we've seen how much this thing has dropped off since Drew left. And again, you just want to find something that says consistent and puts points up on the board, just give some stability. Because again, if they can get it to where it's at least stable and consistent, then I feel good about the defense being able to come in and do their thing, shut things down, being able to take over games, get the turnovers. I mean, if they got all these turnovers that they did this past season, and then have this system,
right?
I'm telling you, it's going to be a successful year. And I'm not telling you they're going to go 13-4 or 14-3 or anything. I just think that that's the difference between being a 9-win team to a 10-11, maybe a 12-win team. And the NFC, I don't see them getting that much stronger right now. There's a lot of first-year head coaches coming in, new coaches, I should say, a lot of times. And, Detroit, I think, is one of those guys, teams that, you look at. I think they're a team that's going to be looking to get back where they were. San Francisco, another one. Green Bay, they have to feel good about what happened with Jordan Love. Philly, man, they fell off the face of the planet. I know that's not going to sit well with them, but they had a lot of turnover. I don't know what's had to happen with Philly and then Dallas, but New Orleans just win the division and it's there for you.
Yeah. And I had a big reaction because you were talking about with the consistency from game to game, and I was thinking, you know what that means, what that needs, John, is that it means you have to have an identity on offense. You have to know who you are on offense. And one of the things that I thought was so interesting during Dennis Allen's NFL Report appearance with Steve Weish and James Palmer was that he was asked by James Palmer a bit about the potential of changing draft fits or draft prototypes on the offensive side because of this new offensive staff. I did an exploration of that from the wide receiver position over on Saints News Network, but the thing that I thought was super interesting was Dennis Allen talking about kind of comparing this 2024 offseason rebuild of the coaching staff to 2015, 2016, when he took over on the defensive side. And one of the things that he said that they were conversing a ton and considering a ton when it was, 2015 going into 2016 is, who are we? Like, what defense do we have here? What's the identity? Is it a 4-3? Is it a 3-4? He talked about the New England single high, talked about the Seattle 3, all those other things, and kind of like what they wanted to be. And then once they figured out what they wanted to be system-wise, then they were able to go in and find the right players to get that done. Now, that didn't all happen in 2016, even though that's when they made the decision about who they wanted to be. That was a 2017 draft, Marshawn Lattimore, Marcus Williams, all that. And so I look at this year, and I look at that comment as a little bit of an acknowledgement of like, hey, the Saints have been trying to figure out who they are. Now they've identified the system that they want to be in. They identified the identity that they want to have. before going into the draft. Now they get the opportunity to draft with that in mind. So I think finding the identity of this offense, which is something that they have struggled with over the course of the past couple of years, Alvin Kamara saying, we don't have an identity during the season. I think that that's a big piece that maybe now they've alleviated by bringing this coaching staff, knowing what system they want to assign to, and then building off of that identity. And then through that comes the consistency, because no matter what's happening on the field, and this is one of the things that I always kind of, when I heard it, I always went, what? Like every time that I would hear it is when you would ask, like, no Taysom Hill this game. He had a huge game last week. What was it? Oh, well, the game situation didn't allow for us to use Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill was one of your best players on offense consistently. So what do you mean that the game situation, is that the game was being played, and therefore Taysom Hill should have been involved. And that's what happens when you have an identity. When you have an identity, it doesn't matter what's happening in front of you. This is what you do. That's what they tell us that they do on the defensive side all the time. Well, we didn't really change anything. We just did what we do, and we did it better. That's something that they struggled to do on the offensive side last year because game situations took them out of their identity. I think that that's something you have the opportunity to fix here in 2024. All right, I'm going to step off my soapbox for a second.
No, you're good, man. I'm glad you brought up Alvin, because he was out there at the HBCU combine, and I thought that was important too, because I mean, these guys don't have to be around the team, right? But I think seeing Alvin out there is encouraging, because some people have talked about, oh, they're going to trade Alvin. He's not happy, all this other stuff. I mean, the guy just wants to win. He wants to win football games, and he's been a winner, for the most part since he came on as a rookie. So, it sucks having 3 straight losing seasons. He's always the first one to say it's not fun, and all this other stuff. And so I think he's going to be a huge part of this. We talked about Kendrick Miller. I think he's going to be a huge part of this. I don't know if Jamal Williams is. We'll have to see how that goes. But you mentioned Dennis Allen, and you were talking about the identity. And for those who haven't followed the Saints, I mean, they had Rob Ryan in there, and Rob Ryan came in, did his thing, but then he hired Dennis Allen as a senior defensive assistant. Ryan got fired. Allen took over the defense. He had started putting his pieces in place. Like 2016, he had got Sheldon Rankins, and then they had Von Bell. And then 2017, they just did a lot of retooling. They didn't strip it down, but they got the right guys in the system. And I know people probably don't want to hear this, but again, I've said this a bunch of times, but reading Malcolm Jenkins' autobiography, he called Dennis Allen the most a genius play caller out there, genius defensive mind, like brilliant defensive mind. And coming from a guy like Malcolm Jenkins, I think that means a lot.
A genius in his own right. Like, that's incredible.
Yes, I mean, brilliant and stuff. And so I again, go say all that to say, having that identity on defense, if D can just worry about that and maybe get a little bit better in the in-game management, and then the offense can take care of itself under Clint Kubiak, this team can be a little bit more functional and be able to win football games.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly it. I mean, the functionality of the team has to be built upon what it is that they want to do, who they want to be. I think if they can start to answer that question a little bit more solidly, I guess I'll say, with a little bit more of a foundation, that's where this identity talk comes in. It should go a longer way for them next year. The fact they won as many games as they did last year based upon how they played, to open up the season was actually kind of wild. And so I'll be very interested to see how quickly the new offensive system actually snaps in. Like we talked about, all the things that benefit that, the type of coaching staff that they built, the experience that's there, the being on the West Coast during training camp, always being together, all those things will sort of help to further all of that. But I am very curious to see, is this a 4-week situation to get them into rhythm? Do they have it right off the bat? Or is this, because what it can't be is another 12-week situation, right? It can't be another post late buy situation to where it finally all comes together. So that's one of the biggest things that I'm most interested in going into 2024 is how long does it take for them to really kind of saddle up with that new system?
Yeah, and hopefully they don't wait like they did, like with the red zone. They're like, oh yeah, we added an extra day. Why wasn't it done earlier? You know what I'm saying? It seems like you figure those things out, and they've learned from some of those mistakes, if you will. And so, some of the defenses, we focus on the teams, but like they're going to play the Chiefs defense or the Cowboys defense, the Broncos. I mean, they're going to play some of these defenses that create some interesting packages and rush packages and things that they do. Some of those teams you can run the football on. Some of them are going to be harder to pass against. Some of them can turn, get takeaways, if you will. So again, you look at this, I'm really excited to see how it builds out, from a coaching perspective. The scouts have been all in on all of this the whole time. The coaches just started getting into their prep and such when Senior Bowl kind of early February. Now you kind of fast forward, you got the combine year, and the combine, we've kind of talked about it. And the thing is, the combine can help people. Same thing with the Legacy Bowl, HBC, all that stuff. But most of what you've done already is already on tape. You know what I'm saying? And people are going to get to know you. You're going to interview. I remember talking to one of the coaches, or we both talked to one of the coaches. Mm-hmm. He said he had 10 interviews that night, you know what I'm saying, on one of the Senior Bowls. And so it's like they're going to talk to every prospect, most likely. There's some that they didn't talk to. I think one of the ones last year they didn't talk to was A.T. Perry, if I'm not mistaken. They're pretty sure.
That happened with Marcus Davenport years ago, too.
Yeah. Yeah, and so again, you can't get totally wrapped up in they talk to this guy. That means they're super interested. They don't talk to, you just don't know. But combines here, a lot of obviously the college prospects, but that brings scouts, that brings coaches, that brings all this mass combination. You've been at the combine, I've been at the combine. What are you hoping to gain from it? What do you like about the combine?
Yeah, I think the thing that you're looking for most is who are the guys that fit, and then how do they test? What do the testing numbers look like? I know that we can get enamored sometimes, and the NFL certainly can get enamored with 40-yard dash times and things like that. But you're also looking at, like, particularly when it comes to the offensive line, like what are some of those explosive metrics, the vertical leap, the broad jump, the things like that kind of give you an opportunity. That the on-field drills, especially for edge rushers, now they run that figure 8 drill that I love, which just shows bend and their ability to be able to get around the edge and all those things. So you're just looking for fluidity. You're looking for a cohesive performance where everything adds up and everything makes sense, right? And then beyond that, you're also looking for what's the scuttlebutt and the news and all these other things that are going on. But just from a scouting combine perspective, a lot of scouting isn't about what you can't do. It's about what can you do well as a prospect, as a player, and how does that fit in the system that's being run for that specific team. And so all these testing numbers and things like that. Like one guy that I'm really excited to see is the tight end out of Penn State, Theo Johnson. He's going to measure in at like 6'5", 6'6", 250 plus pounds. But he's expected to run in the 4.5s. So you're going to see a lot of athleticism coming from him. But then you're going to watch the position drills and the opportunity for him to be able to run certain routes and things like that, because he's actually a really smooth route runner, changes direction in small, spaces pretty well. All those other things, short area quickness, if you will, all those pieces. So you get to kind of finish putting together the story when it comes to the combine. It doesn't tell the whole story, like you mentioned. There's still everything that's on tape. But now this gives you an opportunity to put some numbers, quantify some stuff, and be able to see somebody run the things, do the things that you want to see them do. Then you follow that up with the top 30 visits and things like that during the draft process. And then you get an opportunity to see them. I want you to run this route. I want you to do this. I want you to run this. I want you to show me this rep, all these other things and stuff. So all those pieces, and then, of course, as you mentioned, the interviews go a long way as well. But I think that there's just like a couple of those players that I'm really, really excited to see just how they test, what they look like. And then, of course, the interview portion, not just the media interview portion, but the interview portion between those prospects and those teams end up being pretty big for, making these decisions as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's just exciting. I think, again, I'm going back to the HBCU, the combine, but, some of the guys may not have tested that great. But when they got on the field and did position stuff, I mean, they were just like, some of them were just outstanding on the field. I mean, that you look at wide receiver drill where they're literally catching one ball, catch another one, and they're running across the field. I mean, it's really cool to see them adjust and make those things. I mean, those are types of things that, you may not see from running a 40, doing a broad jump, all that stuff, which is important. I know and get it, but you just can't get so enthralled with just this particular metric, because they could run the fastest 40 and they can't catch worth a flip. And that's going to drive their draft grade down, and such.
No matter how fast you can run, if you can't get the ball in your hands,
that's right. No, I mean, you got to look at that. And so, and one of the things I also like about the combine, I didn't even say it, agents, right? We're going to talk to plenty of course, get a lot of intel. We're going to get more information this week than we'll probably get in the next 6 to 8 months, probably. I don't know.
Until
I
the
mean,
combine, until the combine next year.
This is just our chance. And so, again, keep it tuned. We'll get all that fun stuff out there. But again, there's just so much information that comes out. Again, we talked about, like I said this last week, this is how we learned about Alontae Taylor going into the slot. We learned about James Hurst and the plan for him, and Trevor Penning and Andres Pete. I mean, there's just so many things like that. What was
more
up,
solid on the Derek Carr front?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Derek Carr thing. I mean, that was a big deal. I mean, we stayed on top of it for a bit, but that just kind of confirmed everything. And so this year, it's a chance to kind of get some more of that information, and it's going to be a fun time. I mean, it's a long event. Don't get me wrong. And weather's usually pretty nice out there. They got a storm next week, like a couple of days, like a rainstorm, thunderstorm. So that's going to be a bummer on Tuesday, Wednesday. But I digress. But great town, great city, all that stuff. Great atmosphere to be in, and I just can't wait. And it's just between that and then we're about to get into March. New league year is going to be here on March 13th. I mean, we're almost here to free agency. We're almost here to all this stuff. And then you go from there. The draft is there, and then you're going to have to worry about the schedule. I mean, and then rookie mini camps, rookie tryout camp, OTAs. I mean, I get it. Fans are like, there's no football. But for us, when we do this, that's how we kind of operate. It's like, okay, you got the digestion a little bit from if your team's not in the playoffs, Super Bowl, Senior Bowl, then all this other stuff with the offseason personnel moves and all this restructures. But this is picking up for the Saints. It's not like something that's just going to die out after this.
Yeah, no, not at all. Not at all. I mean, it's a very, very busy offseason, every offseason for New Orleans, because they always keep it interesting for sure, whether it's with the salary cap moves or whether it's the free agency pursuits and things like that. And remember, the Saints, they tend to also pick up some splash signings in like June and everything too. Like they don't, it's not just March for them. And then, they turn the page to the draft and all of a sudden they're not doing anything. After that sort of compensatory pick period wraps up, they tend to be right back in the market again after the NFL draft. We saw that with Jarvis Landry. We saw that with Tyrann Mathieu. We see that with others. I mean, that's a pretty big portion of it too. So it'll be all business and all news all the way up until the training camp.
Yeah, well, that's how they got Lynn Bowden last year. You didn't come on until like June. Jimmy Graham was a late ad. I mean, those are types of players that you see. I think
was later.
Max Garcia was another one too. You ended up playing. Like, I mean, those are just some of those that you come on later and stuff that you just don't typically see. But it is an exciting time. And you said Foster too. But I mean, they sign free agents, guys. They may not be the ones you want, but they're going to sign free agents. And I liked the free agent pickups they had last year, and I think it's something that you look at this team. I don't think they have to have, other than, like I said, my wish list is a pass rusher and offensive line. Those are the two things that I really care about. I think they're good in a lot of spots, but you have to go further. Is like, is Marshawn going to be here? Is what happens with Michael Thomas? Of course, what happens with Jameis? You got to look at those types of things, and so. Again, I think that it's obviously the fun part of this gig is just seeing where this team can go, what the possibilities are, and then just being able to see it all come through.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's always the fun part for sure. And look, it's one of those things where even whatever moves are made are the moves that are made, and so what we do is try to break down what are the Saints thinking about making this move or when they make this move and things like that. So it's never about trying to like overhype anything or anything like that. It's just about, okay, so they made this move. Let's think critically about why they made that move and all those other things. So that's one of the things that I think is the most fun for me, is like looking into sort of where does all of this make sense? How does it all make sense? And what are the possible outcomes of these moves and things like that? Because like every move is a good move until you see it all play out September, October, November, December, January. And so until then, all that we can really do is look at what are the different possibilities here and why was the move made. And to me, that's some of the most fun and exciting stuff, is just trying to picture and imagine, especially with a new system, how all these puzzle pieces fit together.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to answer this one too, or toss this up. We can answer a question before we get out of here.
Oh yeah.
We need line help. Where are we getting that with number 14? And so thank you for the question, Leon, first of all. And, second of all, again, I kind of touched on this, and I think that people, mock draft season, I get it. I understand. But until the free agency plays out, until you know what the restructure and those plans are, as of right now, I would tell you based off everything, I think if you're looking at 14, it's got to be a trench guy. It's either an offensive lineman or a pass rusher or somebody on the interior. I think that's really where you're looking at. But if they solve some of that in free agency, then I think you could go for a skill player. You could go for maybe the tight end, Theo Johnson or something. Maybe, I don't know if that's the case you want to go, but you could do some different things with 14 and 45 is my point. But, what do you think? And agree or disagree?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It starts with the trenches for sure. But you're right. I mean, if they address all of that in free agency, there's no reason to go and do that again. And especially if they not only address it in terms of, adding talent there, but if they add young talent there, then, there's not a full reason to go in fully expecting gonna use this first round pick on the offensive line or defensive line. It gives you the opportunity to go best player available. So let's say that they address offensive line, and I'm going to give you a little bit of sneak peek into my mock draft Monday for tomorrow over at Saints News, is that if you address offensive line and defensive line in free agency, and then you trade away Marshawn Lattimore, what if the best corner on the board is there at 14? Then you might end up going with that corner, or you make, you get the offensive line, you get the defensive line, and you feel really good about that in free agency. You haven't moved on from Marshawn Lattimore, and then best player on the board that's available at 14 is a wide receiver. John, to your point, you can't just rule out the skill position player, right? So I think that there's a lot of different ways that 14 can go. But if the draft started today, then yeah, I would say offensive line or defensive line at just about any spot. I think at 14, interior offensive line, it's a little bit too early for me. Jackson Powers Johnson, guys like that, toward the back end of the first round makes perfect sense. But early on, tackle, edge, and then Drazon Newton, the only defensive interior player that's worth talking about at 14 out of Illinois. Any of those three would make a ton of sense to me at 14.
Yeah, and of course, we're going to see how it plays out. I like their interior. I just think that, again, I hinted on this, and we talked about it last week. I just think they need somebody who can come in and be a game changer. And I don't know if a rookie's going to do that. I feel better about a guy. I mean, they could get somebody that is able to do that and kind of help alleviate, because I like Brian Brzee there. I like what Colin Saunders and Nathan Shepard does. And I could see them re-signing Malcolm Roach. And I'm not telling you that just run it back as a solution, but I think if they can build off of that and then get somebody that's a dominant person on the inside, because on the outside, because, on some of those sub rush packages, we saw Peyton Turner go inside. We saw Tano go inside. I think that they'll continue to keep doing that, but they need somebody to help out. And Cam played hurt last year. Of course, we know that, but just somebody that can come in and really change the complexity of the game, just when it comes to what you want to do or what the offense is going to do. I think it's a big, big, big sticking point for this defense. And, 14, of course, they may trade up if they like their guy enough. And one thing they haven't done is trade back, right? Everybody wants to say, oh, this is going to be the year they trade back. And hasn't happened. I don't think it's going to happen this year too.
Yeah, I would say more likely that they draft an LSU player than it is that they trade back. That's the way that I'll say it for you. They've never gone 10 full years without drafting an LSU player. They're not close to that at the moment, but more likely that they do that than trade back, I'd say.
Absolutely. We'll see. I just love this. It's just such a joy to talk football with you, man. And just, I love it. And just talk about the Saints stuff. And again, we're already wrapping up, coming down to a close here and such. And Ross, I just want to give you an opportunity too, man. Tell us folks about what else you do. Again, we talked about it last week. We're still writing with Saints News Network. Nothing's changed there. We're all unified in that front. Ross is still doing his thing with Locked On. So what else you got coming up there?
Yeah, man. I mean, that's the big thing right now is Locked On and Saints News. So mock draft Monday, tomorrow, going into Tuesday. I want to explore a couple of different things as well, just in terms of like possible off-season scenarios. That would be part of the, if they did trade away Marshawn Lattimore, what the salary cap in 2025 is shaping up to look like, stuff like that. So we'll have that and then accompanying pieces over at Saints News Network to kind of give you some context, additional context around all that as well. So, just keeping it going every single day. And then, of course, with the combine going on, rumors, everything that we're hearing, news. And then, of course, if there's any standout performers, especially guys we've already been looking at for this team, that would be, a lot of that coverage as well. And then post combine, got to do the mock draft again, right? Like we got to get it done. We got to do the post combine mock draft. Then we get into free agency. It'll be a lot of fun. So lots of
maybe we'll do one on here or something. I'm usually a proponent of doing like maybe two. I used to do those and stuff.
Yeah, you're very anti early mock draft.
I
get it. I respect it. I respect it.
And I could see it. I understand. I've had some that hit before and stuff, and it's just some picks hit. And it's not that I don't like it. I just feel like that, again, the philosophy of free agency and all these other moves have to play out. But if you're going off of what the current state of the roster is and doing that, then sure, I understand that. And it always thought, too, a proponent is a mock draft is to A, educate you on the prospect, and B, how this particular player would fit in and what their vision and what they could look like in the next level, especially in the scheme the Saints run. So, which is going to be different, obviously, now because on offense with Clint Kubiak and Andrew Janako and all the cast of characters and coaches that are coming in. So, again, exciting times. But Ross, I want to thank you again for your time. Appreciate you hopping on and everything. Guys, I thank you all for your support out there. Don't forget to like and subscribe, share, all that good stuff. We're going to be here hanging around. Maybe we'll go live in the combine and talk about some things that we see. Maybe not. We'll see what happens. But that's going to do it for us in second episode of Second and Saints. Let's try that again because that's a tongue twister. Yeah, second episode of Second and Saints is in the books. Did it, Ross.
You nailed it.
Y'all be good people, guys. Thanks.